If your acrylic or gel brush is clogged or frayed, don't toss it yet. Try these tips to bring it back to life. So when you're working with your acrylic, you want to make sure that you're not clogging your brushes. And to do that, when you're finished working with your brush, keep your brush in your monomer for a little while. That way, if you do have any little bits of acrylic in there, it's going to soak out and it's going to dissolve in that monomer. After soaking for just a couple of minutes, you don't want to soak it for too long. If you do soak for too long, then you can start to put a little crimp in the point of your brush. So just a couple of minutes, just enough to soak out the rest of that acrylic residue that may be in there. Once it's been soaking for a couple of minutes, you're going to wipe out that brush on both sides and then roll it to a point. At that time, it should be nice and clean. And to be able to tell if the brush is clean or not, if you press that brush down a little bit, give it just a little twist, you'll start to see those bristles separate. And when your brush is nice and clean, all of those bristles will separate nice and evenly and nothing will stick together. If you were working and your brush maybe got a little bit clogged, you can kind of see on this one here, the bristles are sticking together. It's a little sticky and kind of gooey in between. For that brush, we would just want to soak that. So by soaking that for just a few minutes, that's going to start to dissolve a little bit of that acrylic in there, and it's going to help to remove that residue. You can kind of give it a little swish around to help break up those little bits of acrylic in there as well. But after soaking for a few minutes, it should start to come back to life, and some of that acrylic residue may start to dissolve out. Again, give it just a quick little twist and that'll show you if that product has dissolved. You can also very gently use a dotting tool or a toothpick or something like that, but again, very gently, just to make sure that there's no product left in there and just to kind of check that. But otherwise, again, just give it that quick little twist. Make sure that all of those bristles are separating and nothing is sticking together in that brush. Again, we'll go back into our liquid, rinse it out, wipe that brush out on both sides, roll it to a point, and your brush is going to be ready to use again. Now, what happens if you have a brush like this one where it may be a little bit more clogged, there's a little bit of product really stuck in there, that product has been in there for a while, it's dry in there. Maybe you've tried soaking that in your monomer. After maybe 5 or 10 minutes or so, it's still not coming clean. Usually if you get to this point where you've soaked it and soaked it and soaked it and it's not coming out, your brush is going to be ruined as it is. So you can go to your last resort of adding just a couple of drops of polish remover to your monomer. Now, I say a couple of drops, I really mean a couple of drops. So just do just a couple. I'm just going to pour that right down. So just a little bit into your monomer, just a couple of drops in there. And this way, that little bit of acetone in your monomer is going to help to dissolve those, help to dissolve that acrylic that's stuck in there. Now, we use this as a last resort because acetone is very drying on your brush and you don't want to be drying out those bristles. So if you have a brush that is frayed out like this one is an old brush that has been kind of used and abused, and this can happen if you start to soak your brush in straight acetone. It's going to fray out those bristles, it's going to dry them out, and it's going to make them more brittle. So it's going to be a little bit more prone to breaking. So you want to make sure, again, that you're only using small amounts of that acetone to soak out your brush, and only do that on a last resort basis. Now I'm going to let this one sit in here and soak for a little while, and then we'll show you a couple of other things. So when we're working with gel, if you're working and you've got a little bit of that gel in your brush still, at the end of your service, when you're done working with that brush, just use your little ceramic tile here or your art palette to pull the rest of that gel out of your brush and wipe out the rest of that. Kind of tuck that brush, tuck those bristles back to a point, back together again, and that's going to be nice and clean. Now you want to leave a little bit of that gel in your brush. You don't actually want to clean that out completely. So using acetone, polish remover, swipe, or even alcohol, you don't want to be using those cleansers because, again, just like we were talking about with the acrylic brush, if you start to use alcohol or acetone or all of those different things, it is going to dry out your brush. So you want to make sure that you're just using that tile and pulling that gel out of your brush so that you're not going to dry out those bristles. Again, leave a little bit of that gel in your brush. If you feel like you have too much gel in there, you can take a lint-free wipe, just fold that over and gently pull that brush back out. That'll take off any extra gel that's in there, but you still want to leave a little bit of that gel in there to make sure that it stays nice and clean and hydrated. Now, what happens if you have a brush that you are maybe using for your art and your design work and you've got a little bit of gel paint in there? What I'm going to do to clean out that gel paint is I'm going to take a little bit of a clear gel. So really any clear gel is going to work. My personal favorite to use is the base, the Synergy base. So just working that base gel into your brush, pulling that brush on your tile, pulling all of that color out of your brush, and then I'm going to take out the rest of that gel that's in there, clean out as much of that color as possible. If I need to repeat that, I'll take a little bit more of that base gel and again work that through my brush. And then you'll start to notice that it's just coming out more clear. Again, just pulling the rest of that color out. And you may need to use your tile, the whole tile, to get that really nice and clean. You may need to repeat that a couple of times to really clean out that brush. It still looks like there may be just a little bit in there. I'm even going to use that lint-free wipe to clean that out a little bit. So you can still see there is a pretty good amount of color still in there. So just keep repeating that process until you have your brush completely clean and no more of that color is coming out. If you're using gel paints that are really highly pigmented, you may have to repeat this several times to really get that brush completely cleaned out. So just have a little patience and make sure that you are getting all of that product cleaned out of your brush. All right, I think we're probably good on that. But again, just keep repeating that process until it comes out nice and clean. What happens if you have a gel brush that is really kind of stiff and you're not quite sure if the gel is cured in there or not? You can try doing that same process of taking a little bit of that base gel, working that through to see if you can clean out whatever is stuck in your brush. Now on this one, I can see that my brush is splitting. It's still stuck together here. So I don't know that whatever's in here is going to come out. Now again, just like we were talking with the acrylic brushes, using acetone or polish remover or swipe is going to be a last resort. Now keep in mind that if you do have gel that is cured in here, gel, once it's cured, is not going to dissolve. So you may end up having a ruined brush and you may have to throw this one away. But again, as a last resort, if we take just a tiny little bit of that onto the next and just wiggle the brush through that a little bit very gently, you can see if that will dissolve whatever is clogging your brush. Again, if it is hard gel that's in there, that may not dissolve out and you may need to just toss the brush and replace it. But it looks like whatever was in here is starting to break up. So I'm probably going to be able to salvage this brush. I'm going to wipe through that a little bit, see if I can pull whatever is stuck in there out. And same thing as with our acrylic brush, I'm going to give that brush a little bit of a twist. So it does look like whatever is clogging that brush is coming out. So let's take a little bit more of that onto the next and we'll swirl that into the polish remover. Again, this is a last resort. If you've tried all of your other options to clean this out, you can then try using a little bit of that polish remover. And it looks like it did clean that out a little bit. Now, one other option that you can do, even before you try the polish remover, you could actually go to your acrylic monomer and you could do the same thing as we're doing with our acrylic brush. You could soak that gel brush in the monomer and sometimes that will dissolve any gel that may be stuck in your brush. But again, if it's a hard gel and it's already cured, it may not dissolve it. So again, you could just give that monomer a try, rinse that out, wipe that out onto your lint-free wipe. And now I think between the combination of the monomer and the polish remover, we've actually removed the rest of that gel that was stuck in the brush. Now, because we've used acetone, because we've used monomer, you can see my brush is getting a little bit frayed. And that's because, again, we were using acetone and that's going to dry out those bristles. So I do want to make sure that I go back in, pick up a little bit of that clear gel. Again, I'm using base gel. and work that back through the brush. Now, if you really saturated that brush with the acetone, the polish remover, it may not come back to its proper shape. But again, we use that as a last resort, and now we're just hoping for the best to bring that brush back together. And it actually looks like this one is coming back together fairly nicely. So I'm going to clean out a little bit of that extra gel, bring that back to a point, and it looks like we actually did salvage our brush. Now, let's go back to our acrylic brush that we've been soaking here for a while. All right, so this one, we had that little bit of acrylic still stuck in there. I'm brushing that out, and it actually did release a little bit. So this one had just a little bit of that acetone in, just a couple of drops, so that did dissolve out our product that was stuck in there. And you can see that even that last little bit right over here, that did come out. So now if I twist my brush, you can see those bristles are separating nice and evenly on both sides. Nothing is clogging in between, nothing is stuck together. Now again, I do want to make sure I go back into my liquid, wipe out both sides gently, roll that back to a point, and now we've saved our brush that was clogged. Again, if you do have those brushes that you have to use the acetone on, make sure that you recondition them with your monomer. But if you do have a brush that maybe you did try to salvage it and it's frayed out and you're not able to roll it back to that nice tight point, don't toss that brush just yet. Save that brush for things like your liquid art applications or just other art and things like that. So it's not completely useless. It is a brush that you can use for other options. It just may not be your go-to brush for when you're working on your pink and whites. All right, so once you have all of your brushes cleaned out, you want to make sure that you're storing them properly. But if you don't have a cover for them, here's a quick and easy trick to create a brush cover for them. These are just little pipettes that you can take and just snip off the end. And depending on what size brush you're using, if you're using the gel brush, you're going to cut it into more of the narrow end here. But if you just snip off that end, you can use that top part as a brush cover. So this is going to keep your brush clean and dust free, and then you can store it either on your table or in a little jar on your table, or if you do still want to store it in your desk drawer, you can do that as well. But this is going to help to keep it nice and clean, and you can do the same thing with your acrylic brush. You would just cut it a little bit farther up so that it's going to fit up in there. So your brush may not be ruined, it might just need the right cleaning routine.